Hello, everyone. I'm reporting out for our group. We met yesterday afternoon, and if you were there, we were working hard. It was fantastic. Thanks, everybody, for their contributions. I'm going to start with just a little review of what our group's been doing, I guess, over the year. We started by realizing we wanted to have a common definition for pollinator habitat, and we sort of drafted this at our last meeting, but I thought I would share it again. Pollinator habitat contains native flowering plants, host plants, and nesting sites throughout the growing season. So it's flexible for different regions and whatnot. In addition, we had additional great information, so we decided that we would also provide sort of a set of bullet points of tidbits you could add in your communications within your own target audiences or within your own organizations. So you can glance over that, and I imagine this will be provided on that fantastic website that Iris was just talking about. So yesterday's session, we focused on our next project, which was to create a pollinator habitat scorecard, something that we felt was going to be a real asset to our group. And first, we wanted to talk about the purpose of having one and really making sure that we were clear about our objectives. And so just to share that with you all, a scorecard we believe will provide a common language for us to share our work across different entities. And by using standardized methodology and metrics, we can better collaborate and track our successes. We also wanted to tie in with some other efforts. So the geospatial habitat database being one, and also the Monarch CCAA, as well as other habitat assessments that are up and coming, the roadside project, other endeavors as well. And so that is in our minds as we're designing this. We also are recognizing that this tool needs to be flexible for different applications. So these are some of the things that people express an interest in being able to do to identify and measure habitat quality, to determine a baseline amount of habitat, and be able to compare the effects of management actions, and also to set goals and prioritize future work, maybe identify places where habitat enhancements would be desired. So I'm going to just sort of walk you through our process that we've been following over the last 6 months. And we started by clarifying those objectives, which I just shared with you. And then we did a review of other scorecards and habitat assessments. I will talk a little more about each of these steps, but basically we did create a trial scorecard for demonstration use this year and piloted that. And then we received feedback from that. And then I will walk you through sort of the conversation that ensued, and then you can see, I'll touch back to this later about where we're headed next. So we did review about 18 different habitat assessments and scoring programs. We created a massive spreadsheet. I say we, but actually Claudia in Iris's group has been tremendous at collating everything, and we lined up all the different topical areas, the functional categories, and looked at how all the different scorecards and assessments did measure each of the factors. We then identified the commonly repeated elements. We added some more information as we went, and then we proposed a set of factors in the late spring. So we came up with a trial scorecard, and our main 6 factors are nectar resources, which also provide pollen resources, so you could call them floral resources, milkweed for monarchs, additional habitat resources, which really are a little more focused on like bee nesting areas, for instance, but also open space and water. We have a category for pollinators that are observed during the visit to the site, landscape context, and then management practices. So those were the areas that are covered on the scorecard. So this year we had a number of people who tried out the scorecard in the field and gave us comments, and then a number of people reviewed this from the office and read carefully the protocol and whatnot. And we also curated all of these comments very carefully in a big spreadsheet, which is really great. So we can track sort of different comments and how we're making progress. So some of the things that we heard was, we would like something easier. And then we heard something that, well, we need something that's more rigorous. Basically, is kind of how this fell out. So to answer those needs, we realized that we have a variety of different objectives and different scales that people want to work at with different desires for detail. And some people have great expertise and some people don't. And so we realized that we were going to be better off as a group creating a tiered set of metrics that all dovetail together but do give some options. So we added a simple yes/no type tier 1 that is going to be more about defining whether or not there is habitat. And then we created, we're creating a moderate level, and then we still have a more rigorous level as well. So I'll tell you a little more about this. So we thought about, this is an exercise we did yesterday. We thought about the objectives and how you would select whether you were collecting data at tier 1, 2, or 3. And so as I alluded, you know, the first tier is really, do I have habitat? Then in tier 2, you might generally want to describe the habitat. And then in tier 3, you could do a little bit more, which is you could make comparisons across your habitats. You could think about what would happen if you made improvements. You could track the effects of management actions. And we imagine that tier 2, we would end up with some quality scores. So for each component or function or metric, you would have maybe a low, medium, high categorization. And then in tier 3, it would be more of a score. So we would fashion scores for the different levels. So we took a crack at this yesterday. We reviewed our different metrics and how they fit. I'm not asking you to digest all of this right now, just sort of giving you a window into our process. And we kind of corroborated the metrics that we started out with this summer in the 2018 pilot testing, with maybe a little bit of discussion about how to handle adjacent land use, which is beyond our control, and management practices. So we got into some discussions about how management practices, the habitat is a result of past management practices, or what we really need to know about our future management practices, and should that or should not that not be part of the actual scoring. We also touched back to the fact that we all know that invasive plants are a real management issue, but they're defined differently everywhere people work, and so we were trying to really still converge on a best way to handle that in our scoring process. Then we also broke into, again, please don't be nauseated by all the text on this slide, we just broke into groups by these 6 factors and talked about how we might approach the different levels in the different tiers. So looking for continuity across tiers, and also ratcheting up our detail of collection. And we can have more detailed conversations about that if you're interested. And then finally, we took a look at scoring across the main 6 categories and the weights that they would have. So for instance, you can imagine a pie, which could be all equal weight to all slices. But when we did our exercise yesterday, it was really tough. We gave the groups like 8 minutes to come up with this. And so people were pretty uncomfortable with their numbers, but we did find a little bit of convergence, and we did some averaging. And this is not final by any means, but it's a starting point for further conversations. We did converge on the notion that the nectar plants were really probably the most important factor, and everything else we had a little bit more discussion about. We also talked about how these weights could differ according to your objectives and perhaps according to the tier that you're looking at. And again, we were debating whether management should stay in or not be part of the score. So back to our timeline, we are in the mode of scoring the elements, and like I said, there's a few different ways that we will look at it, and we've got everybody signed up for whether they're interested in working through this. What we did over the last 6 months is we did conference calls about every month and push things forward through discussion each month, and ultimately we would hope to have a final set of tiers with scoring. Which is what this says. And I should say that tier 1, the yes, no, that matches up with the CCAA sort of definition, so that those two are dovetailing together. I forgot to say that earlier. And I think I'm out of time, so I'd love to have any questions. Thanks.